joy of leveling punishment and receiving punishment. So he ties judgment to this punishing jouissance and writes, "The donkey needs to feel the whip, and the people need to be ruled with force. God knew that well. Hence he put a sword in the hands of the authorities and not a feather duster." A little misogynist maybe, but anyway, that's why I say girls. Okay, so the sword-wielding sovereign appointed by God to lose the feather duster and administer justice is in any case his own judge. Only the judge can be the plaintiff, can exercise judgment at whim, will, or indeed pleasure. It's okay for a sovereign to decide off with her head or off with his head. All we can say at this point is that Luther established a libidinal account for the exercise of authority, that he focused principally on judgment. The subsequent restrictions that he puts on judgment travel through the works of his successors, whether avowed or presumably off his mouth. If there is an off-ramp, something about which one cannot be sure, even Kafka needs to be viewed under the lens of the Lutheran struggle with authority, its various and contradictory impositions, persons, and offices, its paternal anchor, contaminating entire fields of articulation, joining up forces with improbable conjunctions of thought and political practice, in which the desire assigned to judgment motivates all sorts of flips and contortions that are traceable to Luther's way of nailing the problem of authority. In fact, his entire oeuvre, off and on the page, can be viewed as a letter to father, which Kafka famously wrote. For Luther has made everyone pay for the high-stakes bullying of a famously cursed father. So Kafka's father is Herman, and I tried to offer a hermeneutics here once of that letter to the father. And Luther's father was a total asshole, and we're still paying for that. So, whereas Kafka's father, okay, he was just a father. For Luther, as well as for those under study in the work I'm doing, all authority is rooted in parental authority and requires an understanding of the commanding grammars historically invested in the pater familias. All temporal rulers, all lords become fathers, and so on. And we cannot survive without this. So some of the texts I'm looking at try to divert the rule of unceasing parental supervision to alternate tropological grounds in order to clear the way for a more viable, possibly more just thought of human relatedness. So even for Freud, the father was a problem. And Kojev could have had Freud as an ally, but chose not to, as I said earlier. So for the purposes of political analysis, I'm now wrapping up, Kojev closes the gap between pleasure and judgment, so much so that one can almost see the wheels turning in the minds of at least two of his transfer students, Lacan and Bataille. Because judging is prompted by urge, hence the rush, we say it in English, and rush is also a drug term, the rush of and to judgment. It's a rush. The juridical phenomenon requires a third party, an element of thirdness. And now what I'm going to say very briefly, I'm just going to say very quickly that there has to be a kind of sublimation of this joy and urge to judge. There has to be a judicial branch in every relationship. But this is something I think I'll leave aside right now, and just say that what Kojev is motored by is that the idea of justice can easily flip from the urge to judge over to the consciousness that finds itself being judged. And the problem is that one can get off on all of these rushes of judgment, and one actually, and this is what Kojève underscores, and I think we'd like to consider more closely, namely the fact that one gets off on being judged. One puts oneself up consistently for intrusive review, hence some of the Ph.D. exams, and I want to put a shout out right now and congratulate you who've done so well in these past few days on your defenses. But one gets off on being judged, one puts oneself up consistently for intrusive review, and such acts of submission are part and parcel of a thinking of judgment. So I bring this to a place of ontological default, which is, here's the question mark I bring to the table. Why is it father who figures the authority in so many areas? And for Kojève, what's important and dramatic is that there's a contamination of tropologies. Politics and families should stay out of each other's ways if it's possible, and separate and not contaminate. In other words, it's what he thinks is calamitous and disastrous is the spillover of what Lacan calls the paternal metaphor into politics. Judith Butler recently, when we were carrying on and lecturing in France, pointed out that when there were some uprisings in the banlieue, in the suburbs, both Sarkozy and Ségolène Royal said that what the immigrant neighborhoods need is a stronger paternal presence in the banlieue. So everything kind of regressed and reverted to, let's say, this kind of regressive requirement for a father. And this is something that Kojève already says is extremely problematic. So I just want to keep the focus now on judging, which from Plato to Luther and Kant through Lyotard and Kafka is not only crucial to the often agonistic claims of justice, but front-loads desire and acquires addictive qualities. They all point out in different ways that it's difficult not to judge. And thus judging suffers from something like over-democratization. Everyone's judging everyone, as I said earlier, so to speak, with all sorts of stations and interests vying with each other to formulate a judgment, whether on the home front or in television series, on the field or in school, at a photo shoot or art opening, at court or on the streets, in the mirror or under scrutiny at work. They are constantly passing judgment. Arendt, for other and equally emphatic reasons, points to the judiciary as a place for renewing foundational acts and vitalizing democracy beyond its representative pitfalls, which relegates democracy to professional politicians, carrying it away from the demos, or the people. So I think I had one more paragraph. How are you doing energy-wise? I know you've had a large day and large achievements. Can you handle 5 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Breathe. Okay, so I'm going to quote Mr. Luther one more time. Authority must exist, for otherwise the worldly order would collapse. So here's my P.S. One supplementary remark, a clip to which will tend when Judith Butler gets here. So coming in from a slightly different texture of concerns and reading habits, not particularly a delegate from the Lutheran assembly or party line, and prepared to set a refurbished agenda, Hannah Arendt shows up in 1958 and publishes the essential question, what